Millions of Americans are on the brink of defaulting on their student loans. A new analysis by TransUnion found that 5.8 million student borrowers, representing 31% of all federal student loans, are in late-stage delinquency, meaning they haven't made a single payment in 90 days. TransUnion estimated that by July, i.e. now, up to 1.8 million of these borrowers could enter default status, meaning they'll have missed 270 days of payments. In August, an additional 1 million could reach default status, and by September, another 2 million. In fact, TransUnion stated that the rate of delinquency they recorded is the highest level of delinquency they've seen since they started collecting this data back in 2012. But it's not just student loans. Late payments on car loans also recently hit a 30-year record. US credit card debt is also hitting record highs. Americans are also increasingly relying on microloan schemes like buy now, pay later services, which allow people to take out loans to buy things that usually didn't take borrowed money to afford. These buy now, pay later schemes made headlines when some companies advertised that users could get a loan to buy a meal at Chipotle. Surveys show that up to 1 in 4 Americans are using buy now, pay later schemes to buy groceries. 41% of respondents in that survey said they had made at least one late payment on a buy now, pay later loan in the past year. US household debt itself has actually hit its highest level ever, and all this really just points to one simple fact. American workers are being stretched thinner than ever, and they're borrowing money to make ends meet. This is the real context for Donald Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which he signed into law on July 4th. One of the central things the law does is extend the 2017 Trump tax cut, which gave massive tax reductions to the ultra-rich. Under the law, households in the top 1% would get an average tax cut of $66,000, and in some states an average of $100,000. And just to put this in perspective, top 1% means that the households getting these tax cuts make a minimum of $917,000 a year. Overall, the new law will cut $4.5 trillion in taxes, the bulk of which will be enjoyed by the ultra-rich. The funny thing is that $4.5 trillion happens to be just enough to pay off all of the student loan, credit card, and auto loan debt in America. In other words, the Trump administration is choosing to give a massive handout to the people who need it least, while the American people, who he said his whole campaign was fighting for, go on historic levels of debt to get an education, to buy a car, to buy groceries. Not to mention, the other big part of this law is that it reduces government spending to offset the tax breaks by making the largest cuts ever to Medicaid, the government's health plan for poor people, and food stamps. In other words, Medicare recipients and people with food stamps, i.e. the poor, will be paying for these tax cuts. And this will of course mean that these people are going to have less health coverage, so they'll go further into medical debt, and it'll be harder for them to afford groceries, so they'll have to rely even more on these predatory microloan schemes. It's also worth saying that this is going to disproportionately affect Trump's base, since the majority of low-income households voted for Donald Trump in 2024. If you actually wanted to make America great like Donald Trump says he does, wouldn't you want to relieve people of the burden of debt? Wouldn't you want people to not have to borrow money to buy groceries or for everyone who needs a car to be able to afford one? Why is he not trying to make America as educated as possible? Wouldn't it make more sense to make college affordable instead of an automatic 20 to 30 years of trying to pay it off? As the age-old saying goes, you judge a person by their actions, not their words. Donald Trump has often been accused of using patriotic slogans just to get votes, and that he never actually cared about the American people. This welfare law for billionaires masquerading as budgeting might just be the greatest proof yet.